Welcome back to The Good Talk, the show where we discuss what's hot, what's grot, and everything in between in the wide world of Warhammer. My name is Adrian, and today we're going to be talking about competition painting. What does that mean? What are the ups and downs and potential complications therein? Of course, it's not just going to be me talking at you, because that would be, great for me. But I guess we should bring in some other people to talk about it. So I'd like to welcome, of course, Brian Leyva on the right, little B, and we're joined by the amazing, enigmatic Hosen. You're so mysterious. I love it. From Hobby Goblins, who is a fantastic YouTube channel. You guys have great battle reports, and you're also very, very, as appropriately, hobby-focused, winning community awards, I will say. And I highly, highly agree with that. So
that's awesome, man.
Happy to have you on. Tell us a bit about yourself.
You nailed it. Hobby Goblins out of Jacksonville, Florida. But we've actually got people kind of scattered around the country right now.
Yeah.
We've been collecting the best of, right? And of course, painters. We've got beautiful painters in here with us. Part of our qualification to be having this conversation, if I'm honest, right?
Yeah, right.
But the other big part, like you mentioned, right, we're a community organization, right? So the other kind of category of the best that we have are the people that are going to give the best experience to both new players and old players, right? We want to have people that understand that they can't have fun in the game if their opponent's not having fun in the game, and so they protect that with all of their might. That's what it means to be a hobby goblin.
I love it. And like when because we met 2 LVOs ago,
right?
And you kind of introduced yourself, and we talked about like being fellow orc players and kind of the relationship between like your hobby and your competitive experience as well, and like really wanting to be in competitive space as like a community and like play a good game, have a great time, make sure your opponent's doing the same, and have fantastic models. So I don't know, just immediately I really felt like there was a lot of synergy between our values. So I'm excited to have you here. We of course have you flown in all the way from Florida, so it's nice to have you physically here for the first time.
Well, I have to say, on record, right, that you guys were the early people that we tuned into when I first got kicked off into 40K in that 9th edition. So it is beyond cool to be out here hanging out, being a part of the Good Talk with you guys, man. I'm super, super honored to be here and excited to say hello to everybody at home.
Yeah, if you haven't already, check out Hobby Goblins, of course, on YouTube. We have some links in chat right now. Thank you, Melody, of course, one of our fantastic mods, and check them out. They do definitely deserve your time and your love. So give them a subscribe and support an amazing channel. So with that having said, let's talk about paint. Today we're talking about competitive painting. I think we should probably start by saying, like, what does that actually mean? What are we talking about when we say competitive painting in the miniature space?
Well, it's good to kind of define that, because it is a pretty broad topic, from the Golden Demon all the way down to your local RTT.
Yep.
So I think today's focus is probably the ITC. Right,
Sure.
Tracking a full season of events and trying to hit that #1 spot at the end of the year in the context of army painting. Right. So that's going to be vastly different from showcase painting and your Slayer sword attempts and whatnot.
Exactly. Okay. Sweet. So why should people even listen to us about this conversation today?
Well, we could pay them off. In worst case. But no, so that's like how I cut my teeth in 40K, right? I didn't cut my teeth as a top orc player. There was an 8th edition orc book I was playing on in that 9th edition in the very beginning. But I was rather fortunate in the fact that, my very first ever event, I was able to take home paint. And that event was the first ever GW Open in Tampa, Florida. And so kind of a big deal at the time, especially to a guy that had no real concept of what that meant, what the ITC was, or how to track it, right? And of course, lit a fire under me. I couldn't get to enough tournaments. Right. And I say I was privileged, not because I didn't work very hard. I did work very hard on the product, and I'm very proud of it still to this day. However, the privilege comes from the fact that how do you judge an event? Right? How does one get picked to be the best? And one could say I cheated. I had a giant orc display board. The plane crashed into the side.
Adrian loves
smoke machines, LEDs, right?
I would give you the prize.
But so that board took me to several victories, many of which really should have gone to other people if I was to be judging those events. Right, and so that's where I mentioned the privilege from.
Yeah,
I definitely don't want to humble brag by any stretch of the
imagination. No, it's good.
Oh yeah, definitely.
What gives the context?
Get context, get your qualifications out there. Otherwise, why listen, right? We want to give. We're not coming from a place of the ultimate authority, right? That's not like what this is. It's more of like our experience and how we perceive the competitive scene as far as like the painting stuff goes.
Right.
Obviously, there are painters that are more successful, that have more accolades in this field, I would say. But we have experienced it, and you more so than I have even. But like we've both been competitively painting for you again since 8th edition, whenever you first, or 9th edition, whenever you first got back in, and then me over the last few years, I've been like getting more and more into it, and then Adrian as well. Even like you just got Renman.
Renman,
just recently,
sure.
So like we're definitely in the scene, and we are kind of boots on the ground for this. And obviously, again, there are painters that are probably more equipped to deal with this kind of topic. But again, it's all subjective, and that's kind of like the biggest thing about competitive painting is everything is subjective to whoever is judging. And that's kind of like one of the things that we want to talk about, right?
Right. So, you know, we mentioned earlier, kind of in a primer for this conversation, that, you know, your paint judges out there, by and large, are going to be laymen, right? Yep. And when you have like subjective material that's graded at kind of an academic level, where there's certain expectations that you can follow, you can have subjective still provide a pretty fair result. When you have people that don't understand the basic concepts of art, between your composition, your color theory, when they don't have that basic understanding, then it's going to come down to what did I like better, or more importantly,
the wow factor.
What did I remember after I walked away, right? And that's where, like I talked about, my privilege came from. I dare you to forget a 3-foot tall orc display board that's juiced out, right?
Yep.
And so, to get a push to where we've got professionals in that field that can take a look at your work and give you good and solid cohesive feedback and take into consideration all of that through the judging, right? All of that has to come off of a rubric. You can't, you know, both on and off of it. Let me explain what I mean there, right? You want to have a rubric to where everybody is judging and considering the same things, right? But you also have to come off of the rubric in the fact that there's not check boxes that account for all of these things. Right. If I put together a checkbox of every individual thing that could be included within a composition, you're going to have an overloaded composition. You're going to have something that's not readable, right? And you also don't have the depth to offer, you know, people to have different styles, right? To have your grim dark, to your non-metallic metals, to your cartoon or comic style, right? We want people to be free to express themselves artistically in a way that allows them to like really dig in on their own creativity and not just kind of replicate a tutorial video or box art.
Yeah, and I think the rubric, the need for a rubric is certainly important, and also a robust rubric is really important. You know, we have over in the main studio, we have a second place at a tournament down in San Diego from several years ago, which Brian, our other Brian, lost to everyone's good friend Reese. It was very, very close, came down to the last, you know, final details and points. This was overall score. Right. So at the time, sportsmanship, no longer a thing really, paint and games. And Reese, bless his heart, had a very fully painted Imperial Guard army. And it was like, checked all the boxes. But it was a very low bar, and it kind of just was like static. And so if you went anywhere above, you didn't get any extra points for that. Right. Brian had his beautiful, beautiful Tau, of course. And so those two armies scored the exact same paint score because it wasn't a robust rubric. Right. So, you know, there's kind of that need for clarity and things like that. Because, yeah, you know, that's the other thing. Like you mentioned, big, tall display boards. You know, display boards are already a very contentious topic, right? Because they're massive. Sure. Well, why are they massive? First of all, because you need to grab someone's attention, right? You need to have that big wow factor, and so you have these crazy huge contraptions, which if you're flying across the country or even the world, it's just probably not feasible, you know? And I'll take, you know, in the same kind of vein, credit my Renman is a competition that I haven't really been able to enter in other than events that are nearby, right? Last year, I was told, oh, you should have entered for Renman because actually, you know, you had a good game score, you know, you probably have a pretty good paint score. But I'm only able to do that because I could literally drive my display board over and set it up. And is that art, or is that just like either money or just being in the right place at the right time, you know?
Well, you know, I have heard the pay-to-win argument, right? Because, you know, those of you who know us know that we're crazy enough to drive across the country with artwork just to go attend an event, right? And I don't expect everybody to have the will nor the resources. And to say, you know, well, if I can't bring a big display board out, then I can't win this event, right? That can have that disqualifying feel, right? So when I took over doing a lot of the paint judging for Frontline Gaming. You know, we established and developed a rubric, and since the ACO, just after the launch of 10th edition, I've only been paint judging. That's exclusively paint judging. I haven't played any events or competed in any events, and in doing so, it's allowed me to get out there and kind of see the struggles of what those other paint judges that have been at events. None of them are very happy about the how difficult it is, right? It's more of a burden than something they get to share the joy in.
Yeah,
right?
I think that's a great point also, right? This isn't to call out like, oh, judges who don't have enough knowledge, like they also need the tools to succeed. Right. They're already doing a huge amount at these events. So how can we
primarily
give them
volunteer work?
Oh
right?
yeah, 100%.
Primarily they're coming out of pocket to go and do something nice. Shout out to all of you TOs out there.
They're amazing.
Keeping the circuits alive, man. You're the heroes.
But they appreciate these rubrics and this guidance and this help and things like that. Well, it also means they catch less heat too.
By and large, they need one, right? So you talked about catching heat. Like if they've got something to says, well, you know, look, I don't really know it. I use the rubric. Here's the results. You know, they can kind of wash their hands of the results, but at the same time, they can't offer cohesive feedback, right?
Yeah,
they
there's
can't.
no insight into whatever it is that they're judging. And
100%.
that's kind of like the biggest thing. So if everything is just based off of a rubric, and you had mentioned this, you need to be able to look at the rubric, judge off the rubric, but also be able to judge off the rubric. And that's something that if you're a TO or a judge that's just volunteering and you're not a painter, you're not really an artist in any meaningful way to you, and that's not a slight on anybody. You know, not everybody enjoys painting, and none of this is to try to like target anybody. But if you don't know necessarily what you're looking at or how to understand what you're looking at, and you only go based off of the paper, you're not really doing justice to the painters. And that's, again, not a problem of the TOs, that's a problem of just the system that we have with competitive painting because it's all based off of volunteers. But if you don't know to look off the rubric, it goes back to what Adrian said with Reese and Brian's army scoring the same exact paint. Because you have to be able to look and be like, well, this army is technically just better than this army that's like the 3-color minimum that checks all the boxes. Even though I have to give you the same score, this one should win in 10 out of 10 competitions, right?
100%.
But if you don't know, like if all you get to do as the judge, because that's the parameters that you were given when you get to the event, is like, this is your piece of paper, check the boxes, whatever the score says, that's what it is.
Yeah, so you have to be careful with that. And it's a hard problem to solve for that exact reason, right? So I just want to give a couple of shout outs in chat where people are sharing their experiences. Melody says, I once lost painted to someone who painted their army in the color of the Cleveland Browns, and the judge thought that was funny.
Not the best color theory, I don't think.
Look, I almost had to do a commission in that paint scheme, and I was like, you don't want this. I don't want this. I'm not the guy.
It's so good. Dean P says, I lost to a Deadpool-themed Tau army because the store owner, who was the tiebreaker, loved Deadpool, of course. So, you know, it's hard to kind of avoid these. Part of it's going to be subjective because it's art. And you partially can't get around that, but, you know, that is the difficulty right now. I've also, I have lost best painted to most improved, which is, you know, feels bad. It's like, oh, but this guy did so much better. I'm like, I'm happy for him, but like, I feel like I did a good job here, you know?
To that effect, like also, I guess if we're going to share stories, I have one.
Sure.
I won't say any names. I won't say what event it was, when it was. I just was at an event.
You can always blame Reese. That's fine.
I was at an event, and of course, I was competing for best painted, and this was right after I had. So I took my Eldar, of course, and this was like right after I had finished up like a big bulk of whatever it was. So I was very proud of it. I was very happy to take it to a competition. I thought that it was very well done, which of course it is very well done. But it goes back to, again, the display board and all the other stuff, right? And I lost out to an army that had a better theme than mine. And everybody that I spoke to, including the judges, was like, yeah, your army's painted better, but this is just a better theme. It's better cohesiveness, but like, it's, you know, that's not the only parameters, right? So when you go into something at an event, like, and I felt pretty, at the time I felt pretty bad. Because like, I was looking at my army and I was looking at that army and it was like, to me, and again, I'm very biased with my own army. So take it for what it is. But I was like, there's no competition for me, right? If this was somebody else's army and I looked at this one and looked at this one, it's this one, right? Of course, I would choose mine naturally, but that was a sentiment that was repeated across many people, but that's not what the judges are looking for, right? So
it's tricky. It's tricky, right? Because you put up contests, right? And now if I'm competing and you're competing, now we're opponents, right? Now we're facing off and we're against each other. And that's one of the mindsets that 40K would do well to break a lot, right? We talk about the gameplay itself. The game, guys, I love 40K. The game is a lot of fun. The game is not a very good competitive game.
No, it's not.
It's not. If you want a balanced game, right? That's not what 40K is, right? You know, so with that, and it's so convoluted, you have to play the game with your opponent, right? If you think about the hobby track, in a world where there's not a ton of feedback, right? If you're going to events and those judges are laymen and they can't give you feedback, well, the only other way to get that feedback is to bring those opponents into your fold, right? Get artists working together with artists and sharing, right? If we can defeat the idea that, this guy's on the top of the hobby track and I must defeat him. No, dude, you need to soak up as much as you can 100%. From those resources around you. And the reality of it is, we talked about this before as well, the value isn't a trophy at an event. The value is those people that might be new to the game or intimidated by the hobby that you see staring a little bit longer at your display as you walk by, or seeing your army on a cart, right? Those are the things that are really gonna fill your tank. Those are the things that you can really count on to validate all of the hard work that you put into, even an event that you don't win, right? But the thing about that is you have to take stock in those.
Yeah,
right? You can't let those roll up. You have to make the focus and celebrate those things when they happen.
That's the only thing you can control at the end of the day, because again, subjectivity and all these things exist. You could spend 600 hours in your army, but then some other person shows up and spent 800 hours on their army. Still feels bad to lose to that, right? But if you show up and you are proud of what you did, and people will still think, wow, this is an amazing army, and you get that experience, that's what you got to do for at the end of the day. Particularly things like best paint. It is a recipe for heartbreak 100%. But we're not saying don't go for it. Right. Go submit yourself, get out there. You will also miss 100% of the shots that you don't take, right? I'm again talking about BAO. Last BAO I went and had the conversations with the judge, and it's like, you should have entered if you had entered. And so this year I was like, I don't know, I'm not as good as a painter as Brian, but I know I can play well, so let's see. And if I didn't take that shot, I never would have had a chance to win it, right? And so I think go out there, give it a go. You also kind of have the camaraderie. We're all checking out each other's paint, and it's also kind of funny because it's a smaller subset, and we're these are the people we're passionate about the hobby side of things, And no shade to people who aren't, but it was okay, these were the people at this event that really want to have a good game and have a beautiful army. And so definitely go out and try it and try to improve yourself. But definitely cherish those moments. I want to give a couple special shout outs for super chats. So thank you, Kevin Grubbs, for the super chat. Thank you. They say shout out to the Titans and the Goblins in chat. We have a very lively chat, which is awesome to see. Lots of discussion from both communities. So.
And let me tell you a little something about Kevin Grubbs before we dig deep into it. If you guys look at the ITC right now, you're going to see a certain Kevin Grubbs sitting at the top of it.
Really?
Amazing.
Absolute beautiful painter. I expect we'll see quite a few of those in here today.
Yeah.
Anybody in that top 10 on the hobby track, I guarantee you they know the names of the other top 9.
That's so cool. Right? Oh my gosh.
So it's a really tight-knit world in that art community there. Shout out. Thank you so much, Kevin.
Thanks, Kevin. And I'm going to have questions for you later on in the stream about the hobby track and how people can get involved.
Definitely.
And then, of course, a big thank you to Mr. John McCardle for the generous super chat.
Never heard of him.
Yeah, who is this guy?
Who is this guy? Yeah.
More like the Duke of Dice. Let's see. Blah, blah, blah. I'm a good painter. Look at me. Color theory. Cool guy airbrush. I hate yellow. Blah, blah, blah. Let's get to it and get that to the table. Hobby Goblins versus Tabletop Titans.
That was clearly for you.
Yeah,
for Brian.
Yeah,
I love yellow.
Big fan.
Not really, but
I'm surrounded by people in the studio that love yellow.
It's a great color.
And I feel like I'm on an island.
Chat, how do you feel about yellow? Top 10 colors for sure?
Oh, bottom, one
I mean,
color.
it's top 3 primary. For
yeah,
sure.
yeah, top 3 primary. Exactly. Thanks, John. We appreciate it. And yes, tomorrow is going to be our first matchup, Tabletop Titans versus Hobby Goblins. I'm going to be playing, of course, my beloved orcs. And just off camera in chat, we've got Space Wolf Dan with, of course, his beloved Space Wolves. So we'll be playing that tomorrow here at the normal Saturday time. And then over on Hobby Goblins on YouTube, 4:30 Pacific Standard Time, it's going to be a matchup between Bridger, who's bringing in Boxing Dreads, versus Space Wolf Dan with Space Wolf Dreads. So it's going to be a fun weekend of hanging out with the Hobby Goblins. And again, go check them out, subscribe so that you're notified of that Sunday time. So it's going to be a ton of fun. I'm seeing lots of
yellow hate.
Lots of support in chat. So
Averland Sunset is Bay, Brian.
Oh my, that paint is absolutely the worst paint I've ever used in my life.
I don't disagree at all.
The coverage is terrible. The color is mediocre at best. It's just not.
Let him have it.
Yeah.
Let him have it.
Look, this stream is now just going to be about me
Hating yellow.
Hating yellow.
Maybe if you painted yellow, you would win some best paints.
Oh, this guy.
How can you paint if you ignore one of the colors? The existence of a color.
You know what? That's fair.
I do have a collaboration plan we're going to go over that I think is going to be a lot of fun, but also going to make you paint some yellow.
I hate it.
It's going to be beautiful.
It'll be fun.
So back to the topic at hand, right? It's
Sure.
about finding the motivations for doing these things, the reasons for doing them, and using like placement, prizes, however you want to say it, as like a directing force, but maybe isn't the be all end all. It's a good excuse. It's a good deadline. But maybe isn't the one and only thing to kind of base everything off of.
Right. Definitely. And you got to be honest with yourself.
Oh my God, yes.
Right. You have to be honest with yourself. Yep. Like Ryan, I wasn't there to compare those two armies, but you're always going to love yours more.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
That's what I'm saying. Like you have to take it with a grain of salt, right?
And so that's where you come around and get yourself out of your head. That's where we talked about just a moment ago, the feedback from other artists. That's very important.
Yeah.
You spend so much time looking at something. It's like, the face of your mom, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if she's pretty or not. It's the same face I've seen my entire life, right? And so I'm so used to that like getting that outside perspective is super, super important for sure.
Yeah, and that's something when I first started getting into it that, like, I'm not gonna lie, I definitely had an ego when I first started painting. I'm sure everybody does, right? Sure. You think your paint, like Hosen said, you think your paint is the best paint. Nobody else can beat you, right?
You can also be a big fish in a small pond until you go out there, right?
Right, exactly.
Right. Yeah, because you do have the other side, right? The imposter syndrome is a very real thing that very talented people deal with as well.
And over the last couple of years, I've been like more self-aware, I think, of where I'm at as a painter because I've been exposed to more things on the painting side, mostly with like specifically competition painting. Because last year this last Adepticon, I went and I competed in Golden Demon. And my goal for Golden Demon wasn't obviously to win a demon. It was to talk to as many artists as I could to get feedback on my models. And that is something that when I went, I wasn't disappointed that I didn't win a Golden Demon because my goal was to get the feedback. And I did get feedback from a lot of amazing artists. I talked to Ben Comets. I talked to Marco Frazzoni. I can't even name one. I talked to so many of them, right? And all of them gave me feedback. And just to be more along the lines of everything is subjective, everybody gave me different feedback. And most feedback was actually contradictory, based off of how they like to paint, which made me think in like a massive way how not everything that somebody tells you, even if they are a better painter, will be applicable to you. So because their style isn't going to match your style, and what they like isn't going to be necessarily what is good for the competition or good for you as a painter. So a big thing, I think, when you get feedback is to be able to recognize what you can adapt to your own style and what you should acknowledge and listen to and be like, okay, how can I work that into my already existing process? Because that's a very important thing. You can't just take everything that somebody says and try to make it happen, right? Because that's not necessarily going to give you
That
the
is a
best
great
result.
point. You do have certain information is evergreen, right? Values, right? Your color and your composition, right?
Yep.
Am I playing around with warm colors and cool colors? Am I playing around with dark tones and light tones? Am I working texture into my model? There's all kinds of techniques that can apply those things. And so being able to identify, you mentioned Marco Frazzoni. Marco Frazzoni is a master with the airbrush and working with transparent paint and working with, super saturated shadows, right? If that's not your style of paint, right, the concepts that he's sharing are going to be valuable, even if the specific recipe isn't.
Right, exactly.
Right? But that's again why the rubric has to be somewhat subjective, and it doesn't put everybody in a box and say, well, this is the guy that's the closest to Marco Frazzoni's work, so he gets the win.
Gosh.
Yeah.
Right.
work.
Shout out to Marco.
I judged a painting competition not too long ago, and it was based off of the FLG rubric. And it wasn't just me judging. I was like the head judge, if you even want to call me that. But then also there was 2 other people that were there, just so that way it wasn't all on me. Not because I couldn't handle it or whatever, but I wanted it to be more of like a community thing, right? Because I don't want it to
How long ago was this?
A few months ago. So it was like right after they changed the rubric for FLG.
Okay, so you got to use my new rubric.
Yeah.
You have the panel of the 3 people that come together to discuss the picks at the end of it.
Yeah.
Good.
And so going through that, it was tough because like the other 2 weren't really painters, right? And I was the only one. Like, oh, well, this meets all the things. I was like, yes, but this thing is just like, let's compare things that aren't here, right? And so having to discuss that with them and trying to explain that to them, like they didn't like fight back on it. Really,
Right.
They were just like, yeah, whatever, you can do whatever. And I was like, well, no, we're here together. Let's do it together. But the rubric was really nice to just be able to have a guideline. But also, I think it was really important for not necessarily me to be there, but for somebody who understands painting to be there.
Right.
So that way, to look off the page, right? It was really important. But the rubric was nice to have a standardized thing to just be like, well, I know exactly what I can expect them to look for, and then I can go back to the things that have like the highest scores and to go over those armies, right?
Sure.
Made it much easier for them.
We can touch on kind of how that rubric is executed, right? That rubric doesn't pick who wins the event.
Right, exactly.
That rubric only picks who's going to end up on showcase, right? There's simply not enough time at these events for people to get a good, thorough workover of their paint for a final judgment, right? There's barely enough time to kind of trim the fat and find the best offerings to put on showcase. And once those showcase hit, it's anybody's game. Doesn't matter what you scored on the rubric to get there, right? Once you're there, you're going to be compared to those peers with a panel of judges who are going to independently determine where they think that top podium lines up. And then once they've all created those lists, they're going to get together and they're going to share their reasons why, and as a collective then determine the podium, right? So that allows for a layman to be able to give you the idea of like, I liked this because I'm a big fan of this and it resonated with me. That's valuable information even if it's not technical, right? You know, having that included in there should be in there, but it also should be included in there to have a person that's able to diagnose and say, well, these paint strokes right here, like the brush strokes, could have been thinned down in this capacity, or this technical execution could have been performed, right? Being able to kind of lay all that out and differentiate between the two of them, it's good to have a collective of people.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to give a special thank out to Colin Watson for the super chat. I got the luxury of playing Brian at the CTC this year. I was the Sisters player with the Blue Army theme.
Oh, yeah.
And his army was gorgeous and was a blast. Also cool running into you and chatting at Adepticon. Cheers, Titans.
Yeah.
Thanks, Colin.
Our game was amazing. He beat me. Spoiler alert, he beat me. And he told me before the game, he's like, I never lost to Eldar. And I was like, you're about to today. He didn't.
You can try.
Shout out to the Southeast. That's where Colin's at. So
what's up,
good
Colin?
to see him in chat.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Great time.
So yeah, I want to talk a little bit about, we've talked about kind of a need for a rubric. We've talked about rubric existing in key formats like ITC. So I want to talk a little bit about maybe general advice people can take, things to look for. And part of this is understanding the system and how to play with that, right? You know, and it was definitely something I kind of took. Again, I'm not the best painter, but I was like, if I can make sure I can hit key parts on the rubric, you know, are they look if you can find out, are they looking for a certain amount of freehand? Are they looking for a display board? Are they looking for X, Y, and Z? Question to you, are there certain things that people should be making sure that they hit, just generally speaking, that they should keep in mind if they're interested in these kinds of competitions?
I'd say the biggest thing up front is consistency, right? If you set out with the idea that every model is going to be a showcase model or a centerpiece model, you're never going to finish painting.
Correct.
Right? And so I would tell the people that are just getting started, get something nice, consistent, and cohesive, right? Get that done across your army, and then find the individual models, maybe character models, and use those to kind of exercise the fine detail skills, to really hone in your paint craft. That allows you to commit a lot more time to an individual thing that if things go south, you need to reprime it and get started back over. You're not locked into poor decisions. There's nothing worse than I've got to paint 80 models, and about 10 models in, I realize I just really don't like this color here.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm going to keep painting because I'm not going to paint all 10 of those models again to get them caught back up, right? It gives you an opportunity to have a little bit more freedom and a little bit more expression. And every paint job is really just a primer layer for future paint jobs.
Oh my goodness.
Right? A painting is only done when you quit on it.
Never done, only do, right?
Yep, exactly, yeah. I have a question for you. You said cohesiveness, and this is something that I personally have very strong feelings about. I won't say what they are until I hear what your answer is, so I can change my answer based on what you say. But as far as basing goes, obviously not including a display board, but basing, having all the models on the same base. And the reason I exclude display boards is because once you have a display board, it becomes, for me, it's okay if a model is on a different base than another model, if it makes sense in the context of a display board, right? It's like if you're on a beach or something, you have models in the water, you have models in the sand, they'll be on different bases. But excluding the display board, cohesiveness as far as basing goes, is that like a disqualifier for you for a thing like Best Painted if all the models aren't on the same kind of basing? And the reason I asked this question is because I saw a couple comments on it in the comment section. So I just wanted to hit it really quick before we move on.
Disqualifier, no. But when it comes down to fine detailing the individual things, it could be. Now, I'm going to tell you that I think display boards are important. Right? I think that they are. I think that big oversized display boards, with the way that the rubric is written, actually punishes big display boards if you didn't spend a year of effort into it.
Right.
Right?
There's more room to mess up or not do enough.
Dude, we've got a couple of techniques or concepts, like detail clustering and eye tracing are two things that affect a composition once you've got a display board in them. Detail clustering is effectively how well is your detail distributed across the whole mass of the thing.
Wow,
right?
great.
Do you have a bunch of pieces that are clearly just raw foam that you used a knife to carve away, and then other pieces where you've meticulously detailed? Cool. They should be spread out in such a way where you don't see the differences, that you don't see the vacancies between the two. And of course, eye tracing, the idea being that once your eye hits a subject, is the work that's being done directing you on a path across the composition that pays off, that has moments, as we call them, right? And so if your display, like you take the display out of it and say the basing, right? Faces and bases, right?
Faces
That's
and
what they
bases,
say.
yep.
The idea being that your eye tracing should drive you from the top of the model to the bottom of the model, and in that center mass be that meeting point, right? That crossroads that you're going to go past several times. People aren't going to care as much about a belt buckle or a flap on a pocket, right? Your eye tracing should take them across points of interest on the model and keep them from keep their eyes from stopping and digging in.
That's so important.
And the same thing should happen with the display board. So the larger a display board, the harder it is to get somebody to have that full experience and guide them along that experience. So therefore, smaller display boards are better, right? But you've got to defeat the wow factor, right? Joe Rogan calls it being undeniable. It takes something, you walk away from it, you're never going to forget it, right? If you see like a basic, a basic death skull paint job, little blue, white checkers, it looks great, right? However, if you've seen dozens of death skull paint jobs through the years, right, that's got a good chance of being forgotten just as soon as somebody sees that wild and wacky thing. Right. So you do still have to find the way to be undeniable. Find the thing that you can do in your army that maybe people haven't seen before, maybe they haven't seen it enough, but something that when that person walks away and they recount, like taking a look at the armies they judged that morning, that they're going to remember that thing about it.
I love that. Like, as much as, again, I want consistency and I want to understand like what people want to see, I also, like, this is a creative field. We're artists. We want to be able to have that little spark. So like, it's exciting to hear that that's something that people are still looking for, and we shouldn't get bogged down with like all the check marks. It's like that's exciting. Like, what if I did this crazy idea, this cool concept that I'm inspired by and nobody else has done? The fact that that exists and that's valued, I think, is incredibly important, because at the end of the day, it's all creative work.
If you look at that top 10, and I know I see a couple of people in the top 5 in chat right now. If you look at the top 10, they're all different armies, different paint styles. Right? And they're all good for what they do, right? They're all good within that realm and drastically different. Right? So you gotta have some flexibility, guys. We need the subjectivity in order to have that much depth in our field.
Yeah, absolutely. So here's a question. I mentioned asking about hobby track earlier. I think for a lot of us, it's not quite clear how to become involved. Like, how do you enter in hobby track? How does that kind of work over the course of the season? Maybe you could talk a little bit about that. Like,
absolutely.
Absolutely.
I'm curious. I am, because I haven't been actively competing. I've really only been kind of hanging out with my collective of friends that are still competing, kind of sharing some feedback back and forth with people, right? So I might be wrong on some of my numbers. I believe it's 5 scores that are ultimately going to be submitted. Those scores are going to be pulled from events that you attend. If it's loaded in BCP, the hobby track, the ITC hobby track is all through BCP nowadays, right? So if it's in BCP, that score is going to be submitted. Now, the size of the event, both in players and in the number of rounds, is going to directly influence the size of that score.
Just like games.
So those people that we talk about hitting podiums, they're traveling pretty regularly across the country to hit 200 plus player events, 6 to 8 round events to get those top scores. So if you're going to attend a couple of RTTs in your local meta, definitely look at those hobby scores. Definitely kind of see how they go, but understand that that's who that is there for. That circuit is best represented by the people that play those major events, right?
Yeah.
So let that be the kind of the thing you grow into. You're going to have an opportunity to collect the top 4 or 5 scores based off of however the hobby track works right now. Now we do have the information that says, all right, well, Nova is a huge contributor to the hobby score.
Yeah.
Adepticon is a pretty sizable contributor to the hobby score.
Yeah.
Warhammer Championships, the Worlds, right? That's going to be a huge contribution. And of course, debatably, LVO might be the biggest.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. Just based off the player size, right?
Yeah, but I mean, we do understand the ITC is currently owned by Games Workshop.
Right.
And
fair enough.
guys don't get the rug pulled out from under you
Yeah.
if a smaller event, in the fact the GW's Worlds event, doesn't have, a higher output score.
Right.
Simply
Right.
because it is their flagship property.
Yeah.
Right. The other kind of frustrating
Yeah.
aspect about it is different rubrics at different events, different kind of scoring metrics based off of like where things land.
Right.
And so that's just something that we have to be kind of fluid with. We have to be flexible, and we have to, again, find the validation where the validation is guaranteed to be, rather than hoping from a place that it might or might not be.
Yeah, exactly. Okay.
But yeah, put in those scores for those events. At the end of the year, the top scores are going to be awarded.
Yeah, I love it. That's
And
very cool.
it's all based off of like your actual faction that you're playing also, right? Like
It
they have the
can be.
best overall, and then they
Correct.
have also for individual factions. So even if you don't make the podium as like the top 10
Sure.
in the world or whatever, you can still make the top in your given faction.
Yeah.
And
It's very similar to just like the regular rankings for competitive play, except now it's just for the hobby side.
And the best in faction hobby trophy orcs looks pretty good on the shelf, man. I'll tell you that. Like even those both of those times I hit 4th place, like I was knocked off at the podium at that very event. I'm gonna pick on my guy Kevin here,
Yeah.
Kevin Grubbs. Me and Kevin, once I met him, we did a whole lot of like sharing work back and forth and feedback. And he was in 4th place, and he had a score that didn't get entered. Right, and he was in 4th place at LVO, and I know I was making some noise with BCP to get it fixed. He was making some noise. We'd got a couple other people that also were having that problem, and at LVO, just before the ceremony, they got that score updated, and I couldn't have been happier.
Sure,
even
of
if I'd
course.
won the award myself, I couldn't have been happier.
Yeah.
To see Kevin, who. Guys, keep in mind, no nepotism. He wasn't a goblin at this time. It was after this, of course. It's like
now.
we must has him. Right?
Of course. Yeah.
But he pulled off 3rd place right there, and dude, I was possibly happier than he was.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's so cool. Like you can see kind of that journey. And again, like you just give it your all. And again, you're happy no matter what happened because you also know you put out a fantastic performance and just you inspired a lot of people, honestly, And I think coming back to this idea of like playing the game, because it is a game at the end of the day, learning how to kind of build towards a rubric, set those goals, but also like find your competition and learn from them. This is the same advice we give for 40K events, right? Find the biggest, best player you can and play them and lose to them over and over and over and over again. It's the same thing for paint. Go put yourself up against these amazing painters and you will learn immensely from them. There's so much you can do. Even if you're like, there's no chance that you'll ever win, talk to the judges, especially if you want to even enter individual painting competitions, you can learn a ton. People are happy to talk about it, they're passionate about it, and you'll learn a lot from just that. So I highly recommend just like being involved in your competition, right? I think that's so important.
Or your community.
Exactly.
Right, because that's what it is at the end of the day.
100%.
Right, this is just one big art studio.
Yep.
That people have their different stalls in, creating their different works.
It's so cool.
Find your peers, and you're going to find people out there that like you really idolize the work that they do.
Yeah.
Those people are then going to see your work at times and really be impressed by it. And like that's validation from your peers matters far more than a validation from a podium.
Yeah.
Definitely.
100%.
Yeah, I agree. Being able to have the people to talk to and be able to share, like, there's nothing, I don't want to say worse, but there's nothing worse than feeling almost like you're the only one that's excited for something when you're trying to talk to somebody else. Like a lot of us, for our partners, our wives, our husbands, or whatever the case is, right, that aren't a part of the hobby, that aren't a part of the game, when we try to show things. Like I experience this all the time with my wife. She doesn't play the game. She doesn't do any of that stuff. Like she has really no desire to learn it. I've had her sit down one time to paint something, and it was like 30 minutes. She was done, whatever. But when I show her stuff and I'm like really excited for it, she's like, "Oh, it looks good," and I'm like, it doesn't feel bad, you know, because like I know she genuinely thinks it looks good, or she's happy that I'm happy, or whatever the case is. But having somebody that's equally as excited about it as you, and being able to just to talk to each other and bounce ideas off each other, and having that constant communication with somebody else that is actively trying to improve their skills, just like you are, is very important. So being able to find those people in the community, even if you're going to a tournament and you don't know anybody there, just go and talk to people, because people want to talk about it, you know? Like, if somebody comes and talks to me about painting, I would much rather talk about painting than playing a game. Like, 100%. If I'm at a tournament, talk to me about painting, don't talk to me about the game, because I'm going to lose the game anyways. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, definitely. Now, and that is a great point, too. Like, my wife, kind of the same way, you know. 20 years in, although I just got started in 40K, I've been doing, you know, some sort of creative something since the very beginning. And there is a certain point where your significant other just has to be like, oh, that's fine, sweetie. And like, just leaves you to it.
You have to say that. You hate it.
To be actively involved in a community where you can actually share. Because like, we all know as well, like the attaboys and that's pretties do the least for us in personal growth. Right? Where we actually get our growth from is somebody going, hey man, I like you and all, but those boots are jacked. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
You know, fix your leather, address this, where's the shadows, right? That's the stuff that is actually going to help you grow and improve. And so if you want that kind of echo chamber of people just constantly saying, oh, that's pretty, like, you know, that's great, but your growth is going to be fettered by it. So finding a community that you can engage in, and I know that's our big push, is making sure that, like, if you see me at an event and I've got the judge jersey on, I'm not playing that event. I'm around all weekend. Right? I'm going to sit down with you if you want, and we're going to talk about the hard stuff. You know, and for those people that I can't make myself available for at the event, we've got the ability to make ourselves available after the fact as well. So, you know, that's the key thing. And guys, if you're an artist out there and you're performing very well, you know, that would be something I would strongly consider for you as well. There's a thing about taking somebody from a beginning level of something to an advanced level of something that has a value to you as the teacher. Right? You're reinforcing things you already know, and likely going to wind up learning a couple of new things along the way in response to questions they have asked. So both ask for feedback, but also like subject yourself to people who your feedback can be valuable to as well.
And then to that point also, if you are the painter that's asking for feedback, be clear what kind of feedback you're looking for. Because oftentimes when somebody asks me for feedback, I try to cater it to where I think that their level is at, because all they're asking me is, how does this look? As opposed to being like, hey, I know I'm not the best painter, but I want to improve. I want you to just like rip this apart. Tell me everything, right? Be very clear with whoever you're asking what you're looking for, because I don't want to be the guy to be like, well, this, and have a laundry list of things when you were only asking for the attaboy, you know? Like, I don't want to do that to anybody, and so just be clear, because that will help us as the people giving feedback, and if you are the one giving feedback, ask them too, like, well, what are you looking for? What kind of feedback are you looking for? Do you want me to be like brutally honest? Well, don't say honest, because then they're gonna know that you're like, you know,
no, just lie to me.
But you know, just try to make it clear what you're looking for, and that way, whoever's giving it to you can give you targeted feedback, as opposed to just like a general, broad kind of thing, right?
I find one of the best practices with feedback, and you know, to each their own for sure. But the first thing I'm going to do in a feedback session is I'm going to identify the things that are working. I'm going to look at it and I'm going to say, hey, like, I like this. This is working here. I note how you accomplish this. Because the main thing that I want to get across first is, if I take a piece, and everybody's received feedback like this at some point, I'm sure. If I take a piece and I'm like, well, fix this, fix that, fix this, fix this. Well, you might be trying to accomplish something, and I might notice it, but if I don't communicate with you that I noticed it, well, the value is diminished on the negative feedback I gave you, because I might not know what you're going for. Right. And so if I can identify the things that were executed well, then it kind of puts me on that same page with you, where you're not just getting, you know, dumped on with a bunch of negativity. You're also getting that positive reinforcement of the decisions that you made that were working. And that obviously is nice for that internal attaboy, but the analysis paralysis, the imposter syndrome, you gotta make sure that you know what's good to keep it around, right? You don't wanna get negative feedback and then start a project over and, you know, throw the proverbial baby out with the bathwater, right?
Exactly.
You wanna keep the things that are working, tweak the things that aren't working, you know, and go along from there. So identify what works, And that will also help kind of diffuse some of the negativity, right? Because constructive criticism can be kind of deconstructive at times.
Yeah, especially if there's no like real guidelines for it. If it's just like, these are all the things that are bad, well, now there's a good chance that this person that's just starting is going to stop. And that's like the worst case scenario, right? So try not to do that, because we want the community to grow in a meaningful way.
Absolutely. Big thank you to Lehman Rest for the super chat that kind of vocalizes what actually a lot of people are talking about in chat and are discussing is, how do you feel about commission painted armies being entered in competitions that they have not painted? Obviously, this can be the source of a lot of field bads, but I think it's a great question to bring up. What are your thoughts on that?
Let's go to like the perfect scenario.
Sure.
Right, the perfect scenario, you have somebody that when that art is submitted, that work is representative of that artist, right? If I've got a guy, look at the top world eaters right now, right? He commissioned that entire army.
Right.
And if you go up and you approach him and you tell him, hey, your army is beautiful, right? He's going to tell you who did it, and he's going to sing the praises of this artist. And it's such a small and niche community that word of mouth marketing for people that are trying to run commissioned studios is very, very vital. Right? You're gonna, those small studios are going to get far more work from somebody who's raving about your work than any internet ad, right? And so that is very important to do, right? If you're taking an army that's commission painted and, you know, kind of demonstrating that you painted it, I mean, that's some like stolen valor sort of art behavior, and that is bad. However, the existence of commission painters winning the contests over people that painted things themselves, I don't think is bad. I think it creates a feels bad, right? Yeah. Especially like we talked about, if that person is demonstrating that, look how talented I am, when it's a commission. But the reality of it is like, what it should be is a celebration of art. And just because somebody's getting paid to do something at a high level, I don't think should exclude them from being able to participate. Because if that commission painter painted his own army and showed up, it's kind of the same thing. That piece of competition is still in the market for this person at home, right? And I think that's the big thing, isn't so much about whether commission painters should be there, it's about combating the fact that I got beat by somebody with a commission army.
Yeah, I think it's the tough thing of, that kind of the stolen valor is a good way of putting it, because it feels bad to have, you know, someone win with an army that someone else painted. Like, we want to give the person who painted it credit, but it feels bad for someone else to get credit. Like, they're still, at the end of the day, they take home best paint for an army that they didn't paint, right?
Sure.
And it's complicated.
It is very complicated, for sure.
It's a complicated feeling.
Yeah. So I have another story to tell. Again, no names, no locations, nothing like that.
Sure.
They'll be
I
in
went
the
to an
comments.
event.
Blame Reese.
I went to an event and I competed, obviously, for best painted. There was an army there, and at the time I was still working for a commission studio, so I wasn't doing my own thing just yet. There was an army there that was submitted for best painted. That was painted by the studio that I was working for, that I worked on. I didn't work on the particular models that were in that army, but I worked on that army for this client, and they placed higher than me in the painting competition.
Yeah.
And I look, I wasn't happy at the time. To be perfectly honest, I was actually very upset at the time.
Yeah.
But like looking back on it now, I kind of equate this a lot to car shows.
Yeah.
Not the same thing, I know. So just bear with me here.
I like
but
it.
like at car shows, nobody does all of the work in car shows, right? You're the one who curates everything, but you don't actually do all of the work. You might do some of it, but you find the people to paint the car, you find the people to do all of whatever. I don't know, I know all what goes into a car show, but like, you just own the car, essentially. You don't do all the work, but you have other people there doing the stuff, and you get to take home the award for having that car. Again, not the same thing. Painting miniatures is not the same thing as buying all of the things for a car. I get it. But in the same vein, like, there probably are people that do all of the work. And they might get beat out by people that get the work done by other people.
Right.
So why is it different here? And I think it's because it's the feels bad, right? I spent however many hundreds of hours painting this army to get beat out by a person who just paid to have it done.
Yeah.
And they didn't put any time and any effort into it, and that is what feels bad.
Yeah. It's personal. I don't love it. I feel like I just wouldn't submit it to best paint.
Right.
You know, it's like you have to take the time out of your day to like put yourself on a pedestal. That's not your pedestal. Right. You know?
To be fair, like if there was a way built in where I was signing up for BCP and I was able to put in who the artist was for
that would be cool.
And that specific studio had a presence on the hobby track throughout the year based off of how their armies did out in the public. I think that a lot of the gray area or the feels bads goes away because now it's an entity. And you get it combated with the fact of like, like I went and my army beat a Hobby Goblins studio army that was out there, right? Now you've got like,
that's kind of fun.
You've got the the David and Goliath potential.
Exactly.
Right?
I think if a system like that were to exist, individual awards could not be handed out to those particular people that are winning with commissioned armies, because I think that is actually ultimately what the issue is like people are winning the awards over people who did all the work. So if you had like a thing where my army that was painted by this studio beat your army that was painted by the studio, the award should go to the studio, not to the person.
I think that gets a little bit cloudy there as well, right? The reason I say that is like what we're talking about is a transactional thing and an expectation. If I'm going and I'm winning, I'm going to get myself a nice set of paintbrushes, or I'm going to get the full line of Army Painter, because that seems to be every tournament, right? You get by and large a product that's very like almost meaningless for you. If you're already painting on your own, you've already got your paints that you like at the house. You're probably not using half of the free paints that you're getting, right? You've probably already got the go-to brushes that you're working for, and so then it just becomes like this physical thing is it is the example of that validation. And I think that if we come back around to the validation, like those brushes aren't going to help that studio really either, right? So I think if we just kind of step away from the idea of like what I deserve or what I've earned, right, then we defeat a lot of the fields bads that we wind up putting on ourselves.
I think so when I was talking about like the awards and stuff, I wasn't thinking of like products. Because most of the time products don't have any meaning to anybody that actually paints.
Like, who wants this?
Oftentimes you're painting with probably better brushes than they're giving you. You're painting with the paints that you're comfortable with, that you like. So like products to me aren't really the award. It's like the trophy, the plaque, or whatever it is that they're handing out to you, and that you get to take home. Because ultimately, that's when you compete. You want the trophy. You don't care about anything else.
But you have the trophy. You just don't have their trophy, and your trophy is far prettier.
True, but the people that did all the work also want the trophy to validate their work.
I get that. I get that, and that's where the conversation comes down from validation. Right? Is that like, and again, it hits both sides. You've got beautiful painters out there that feel like they're not very good at it, no matter what kind of metrics they put up. They still, and so this is like, I'm not just saying, hey, everybody, like stop doing the thing that you've been doing and just change this mindset. It might take some work at it, but a lot of that pain comes from those expectations that we put on ourselves, right? If I go out to an event, and this is actually pretty interesting, I can demonstrate this. If I go to an event and I don't win the event, it's probably because somebody's army is better, right? Something about it spoke to them. It was more undeniable, even if the technique wasn't performed as well, right? For whatever reason, they got the win. Those experiences that I had on the flip side were why I started judging. Right, going to an event, and I'll call out a good friend of mine, another very talented painter, Matt Aaron. Matt Aaron took best in the hobby track a couple of years in a row for a good reason, right? But me and him were at Atlantic City together, and I wish I knew the guy's name. I was still very much in my own game at the time and competing, but there was another orc player that sat up right next to me, and man, his work was incredible.
That's awesome.
And he was on a small FLG tray that just had completely covered with nice detritus to create his jungle floor. He had really nice freehand. The whole thing was beautiful. It lived in my shadow, literally, because it was set up right next to my piece, and I had this big obnoxious display board. But when I found out the results, Matt Aaron took first, I took second, and then this guy wasn't even on the podium. Forgive me, whoever was third place, I don't mean to forget you here.
You have lovely jungle shrubs.
The reality of it is, I went to the judges after that. I dropped game 5. Went to the judges. I talked to them. I'm not gonna pick on them or point them out, right? But I went over and had a conversation with them. And what was funny was I went to defend this orc painter. And the guy was so confused. He's like, "But you're the orc painter." I'm like, "No, the guy next to me, right? This guy should have gotten first place. There was no reason on earth." And when I was asking about it, I'm like, "So well, what about this? Did you guys note this? Did you consider this?" I'm stepping up and defending this guy I can't even name right now, right? Because of how good his work was.
That's cool.
And that's when the judge came back and he said, "Look, man, we're not artists. We don't really know all of this." Like, and you could kind of tell that he was a little bit irritated by the fact that I was maybe a little bit in his face and not even in defense of my own thing. He's like, this guy's getting second place, like he's getting a trophy, like what's going on here?
Right.
And that's the hard part, right?
Yeah.
And it's easy to like walk away from a situation and think about like, what should I have gotten, or what kind of acclaim or recognition, or did I get scored fairly? But the reality is, like, there's a lot of times out there that there's other armies that are getting overlooked for a single reason, you know, that sometimes is not even in their control.
Yeah.
And so being able to have like a studio be able to get that recognition, kind of to tie it all the way back in, getting that studio to get that recognition for the thing that they accomplished. For me, it doesn't matter whose name it is, as long as whoever's carrying it around is going to be the first person to like share with you where it came from, right? To support kind of that small business, right? But it's a celebration of art, not the artist.
Exactly.
I have one more question on this topic before we go on to whatever else. So obviously you guys commission. You have a commission studio. I do commissions personally, and then obviously we're going to be starting a commission studio here through Tabletop Titans.
Yeah.
And as somebody who judges paint, and I have been doing more and more of that, I'll be going in October to do the same thing over at an event in Alaska. The one that I went to previously and judged, one of the armies there was one that I commissioned, like completely commissioned. It was actually John Magnet.
Oh, okay.
Like the whole Thousand Suns, you guys have seen it on the channel. Yeah. He was there at the event, and I wasn't the one to say this, but the TO was like, you can't enter the competition because I was judging.
Sure.
Wait, what?
Because John would have, if he had
He
submitted
wasn't allowed to submit because you were the
I
judge?
painted his army.
Oh, that
and
sucks.
I was also the judge.
Right.
And I would never have picked him.
I don't know what the solution to that is, but that
again,
sucks.
that's a big thing because now he's disqualified. Even if he could enter the competition, I can't pick him.
That's too far.
I'm not allowed to pick him, like, even if he was allowed to enter the competition. So now he's disqualified based off of the fact that the commission painter was the judge.
It's not the right call. You know, we've got a pretty big presence in the art community, right? As an organization,
right?
It's funny to call us an organization, by the way.
Sure.
that just warms me. Anyhow, so if I'm judging a ton of tournaments, we still have to be able to have hobby goblins judged. And so what I do is anytime I'm at an event judging a tournament, I don't judge anybody who is a part of the club. I also don't judge anybody that I do regular feedback sessions with, right? That's why it's important to have other judges. Now, when we get together at the end of it, we're all going to be having a discussion. Once it's hit showcase and we've got our panel, we're going to have our discussion, and I'll have no problem whatsoever sharing about the things that work and the things that don't work, because ultimately I'm not making that decision. The collective is making that decision. So I think that's the kind of the best way that it could be handled, right? As long as you've got that insulation. If you are solo judging an event and one of the armies is an army that you painted for somebody, it's probably best to abstain from
There's no way that I could have picked him, right? Even if he had been able to enter, and I did pick him, everybody knew that I painted that army.
And what's funny is you're probably going to be harder on that army than you are a lot of others.
Super critical. For sure.
So that's the funny part.
But in some world where that would have won, right? If I was the one to have picked it, now everybody feels slighted, and I'm the one that's in the wrong, even if I'm not in the wrong. So, like, how do you go, like, there's no real good answer for that, right? There's no way to get around it, unless you have multiple judges, like you were saying. You have to have the panel of judges to be like, I can't have anything to do with this army. You guys can take over this, and then we'll move on from there. But even doing that, if that army still wins, I'm still part of the judges.
Sure. And so we've dealt with fallout.
Feel slighted, right?
For sure,
We've dealt with fallout from that a bit as well.
Yeah, and like entering commission paintings aside, like the answer in no world is
to disqualify somebody.
Well, to disincentivize people from being in the community that they're participating in, right? You're being punished for being part of the community.
Right.
And so regardless of how we feel about everything else, like that's not ever the response.
To be clear, John would not have won because 2 of his models were broken. And I was very upset with him. And I told him.
Sorry, John.
Wow.
You heard it here first.
Oh, I could never win a best
His Terminators were just like broken in half. And I was like, John.
Oh no!
Oh my gosh!
He put up for judging with it still broken.
Yeah, he was like, "I was just gonna put the broken ones up there for you."
I'm gonna flip this on you. I'm gonna ask you a question. Let's say you're at this tournament in Alaska, and one of your people shows up, and their army is a wreck because of the flight.
That's tough. So I think in that instance, I would have to judge based off of what they put up there, right? So if like there's still like broken models and things like that, and they are very clear, like, hey, this happened when I flew over. Right. And here's all of the things that are readable and are still intact, and here's all the things that are broken. I can base my assumptions off of what's intact. And I can look at what's broken and be like, okay, this matches the same kind of quality here. My assumption is that it would be the same quality, right? And even if I'm like looking at the pieces, well, I can see that the power sword is still painted like a power sword, or whatever the case is, right? Even if it's not fully attached. So I think I would judge it based off of that. But that's really hard. Like I've thought about that a lot, especially like with like Golden Demon and stuff too, when the judges break the models.
Yeah, that's a tough one when the judge breaks the model. Yeah. I mean, if it breaks on their way there,
it's tough, you know.
Right,
like,
but
the
with
judges
the judge
can't do anything about
different.
that in that kind of setting, just because of the nature of the competition. But for like a best painted, where you have other things to compare it to, I think it's a much easier solution to just look at what is actually still legible, and then to go off of that.
So the best practice is probably just to take your stuff that's not as good as your best stuff and just break it.
Yeah,
blame
absolutely.
the airlines.
Yeah.
It's just like, stupid airline, didn't you drive here? We're like,
no, I have my own shit.
was
Crazy.
A plane flew too close. I got a swervy.
But you can see these two models here, right? The other 98 are basically the same. Yeah.
Well, like, you still have to inspect the broken stuff. If you can clearly see that it's not the same quality, then make your judgment off of that. But
we had another friend of mine, Aegis Games, Noah Badome, plays with Aegis Games at a Pacific Northwest somewhere. Cool. He showed up at LSO a couple years back, and he had this big wooden barrel that had been converted to where the inside of it was his display board. And TSA felt the need to drop kick it and pull out all the guts to inspect it. And so he shows up the day of, and he's like, and so I was fortunate. This is one of those times that, like, I have sat down with Noah and given him feedback. And so I did judge his work for that, because I had seen a ton of photos of the work in progress, and I knew kind of what it was supposed to be. But yeah, short of that, like if we're tight, if we're down, I'm going to send you to another judge.
Yeah. Very interesting.
That hurts though.
It does, dude.
That is painful.
That's why I've driven far more than I care to admit.
Yeah, you're wild with your driving.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well, we're kind of finishing up here,
Awesome.
coming to the end of the stream. So if you have any final questions for any three of us, now would be a good time to send them in. I've been really appreciating all the discussion, people really talking about what y'all are discussing. It's interesting. It's something that we're very passionate about. It's something that's not always clear, right? How it works. So it's good to kind of get that discussion going, get some insight on it, and we're all here to kind of hobby and share in this space. So it's good. So let's get some final questions. Last chance if you have any. But before we sign off, I do want to talk a bit about more about Hobby Goblins and what you guys do, because honestly, it really is incredible work. And
Thanks, man.
if we got to shout it out. I want to talk about it. So tell us a bit about like what you guys do and what's important to you.
Well, in terms of the Club Collective, before we just get into like all the direct plugs, the Club Collective, obviously the community is the big push. If you're going to be attending an event, consider adding a little extra time on to help those guys set up and break down. Right? We have been very active in helping drive that kind of trend, and with that, a lot of the major events that we've seen, we've gotten a dozen, sometimes 24 people there a day early to help make that happen. A lot of the TOs, like we talked about, are not paid, right?
Yeah.
And that's a lot of hard work, right? So if we're going to enjoy that experience, get the TOs themselves, the people putting on the event, they're going to greatly appreciate that assistance. Be kind to each other. Remember, you're granted a very big benefit in the fact that you've chosen a pastime that's going to be an icebreaker for you at these events. You're going to walk up to a table knowing exactly what you're going to spend the next 3 hours making a friend about, and not have to worry about like, what shows do you watch, right?
Yeah.
Or
Right.
Small talk. Oh, the weather is crazy today.
So don't lose sight of that. Win or lose, you've got a great opportunity to make real face friendships in a very digital world, right? So we just want to make sure that we promote the things that brings joy to people about the game, because we firmly believe that if you subscribe to those sort of mentalities, you're going to enjoy the game more too.
Yeah, absolutely.
But you can check us out. We do battle reports a couple of times a week. We do cave reps, which is our 3 times a week. That's correct. I lose track.
That's hard.
Yeah. So they are definitely that sportsmanship focused. So just like very much like you guys here, reminding people how to play a game with friends and have fun.
Exactly.
You know, play at a high level sometimes, low level at other times, but always at a fun level.
Exactly.
We do have painting content that we've gotten going with a couple of, just one painting stream a week right now called Hobby Pants. Had to think about it. Such a clever name. It evaded me for a moment.
I love it.
But that'll be Saturday night. We've actually got one of the guys in chat, Doomsayer, here will be moving around the paintbrush for us.
Doomsayer.
Saturday night. So, but definitely check us out. And of course, that Discord, I've mentioned a lot about hobby feedback. If you're an artist out there that wants to kind of get things going, get yourself in a community. These guys have got a great community for you to drop and share your art in. I really enjoy seeing all the work that rolls in there. But that's gonna be a great way to do it. You know, get involved with people making art and start having those conversations.
Right. Definitely check them out. Highly recommend. We've got just a couple final questions from chat. We have one from Melody asking, what can I do to paint better? Nice specific question.
Yeah.
Start by flipping the brush around. The hard end is the wrong end.
Wait, what?
I'm more of a
You just start to very beginning. Right?
Brian's like, oh.
What can you do to paint better? Keep doing it.
Yeah.
That's the easiest answer out of the box.
You got to get the reps in.
Just keep doing it, right?
Yeah.
Nobody is good at anything. I don't care who you are. Nobody's good at anything at first. You gotta start being bad at something before you can get good at it.
Yeah.
So, and then share your work, right? Be proud of the things that you've accomplished, but open to the things that you can change. Yeah. And share your work.
Cryptshadow has a great shout out. Oh, sorry.
No, I was just gonna say, be open to feedback.
Yes.
Ask for feedback, be open to feedback, and don't take it as like a personal insult or whatever when somebody tells you that something's wrong or needs changing or whatever. Be able to accept the feedback.
Right.
In exactly that same vein, Cryptshadow was suggesting classes at LVO, Nova, Gen Con, Adepticon. I also highly recommend this. I know it can seem a little bit scary and weird because it's not something that everyone does, but you will learn a lot from just spending some time with these artists. And look, every time one of my friends takes one of those painting classes, I learn a lot with not even going, just little things. So definitely recommend it, and it's a great way to also meet new people.
Yep.
And then here's a fun one from Dean, who's very active in chat. Single favorite paint model that you've painted?
Single favorite.
Only bit, we'll get one.
Oh my god.
That's tough. Can I count something that was a part of my display board?
No.
Yes.
Yeah?
No.
It's a model.
All right, well, I'm going to answer it for the yes, but then I'll come up with a different no for you, Mr. Yellow.
No. He immediately said no, like no hesitation. He judged a broken model, but not you don't get to use this one.
Well, yeah, I didn't know, like, display boards are controversial. We know this.
That is true.
I took nothing but plastic card, milliput, some Bondo, various adhesives, and I made a 1950s burger joint facade.
Yes.
And painted it up, checkerboard. It's called Squigway. The tagline, eat flesh. It is probably my favorite moment in every little thing that I've ever painted.
Yeah, it looked fantastic. Oh my god, so much flavor behind it, you know.
Just $5 a foot.
Yeah, I was like, no pun intended. A foot. Oh, so good. Brian?
Oh, okay. I'm still thinking, Adrian.
You're like the most indecisive person.
I am, and it's making me stressed.
So I would say to satisfy Brian, I did some Beasts of Nurgle. It was my very first commission. And by that, just for clarity, it means I didn't charge nearly enough.
Right.
I'm like, but I painted up these Beasts of Nurgle that were just a ton of fun. And although they're not necessarily my best paint, they're probably one of my favorite things to go back and re-see.
Yeah.
Okay, I have an answer.
Yeah.
The model's not done painted yet.
But it's going to be your
but
favorite.
it will be.
Future answer.
So future answer,
Ooh.
but it is my favorite thing currently to look at and just to like be able to see where I'm at with my progress. But it's from actually a class that I took at LVO with Ben Comets, the master class. We had like a little bus that we were painting, and the reason it's my favorite is because there's like a story behind it.
Right.
And like I'm emotionally attached to this model because before we got to paint the model, we had to first build. It was already built. It's like 3D printed and stuff. But we like created a story, and then we made a model to match the story, and then we painted the model based off the story that we wrote and the model that we had in hand. So I think that's definitely my favorite one that I painted because I'm like emotionally invested into this piece. It's not done, but
It's going to be the best.
It's my kind of like whenever I show somebody faces,
Yeah.
like painting faces or whatever, like this is the model that I show them. Even though it's not done, I'm like this face is
Oh, it's
like it's everything to me, you know? It's everything. So like that's mine. It's not actually a 40K model, which is kind of strange because I paint a lot of 40K models, but
Right? Pretty wild.
what about you, Adrian?
Oh God, I was hoping I would have to answer this.
There's only 3 of us, and 2 of us have gone. Plus 1 of us have gone twice.
Oh gosh, painting, like pure painting makes it hard because I have like models that I really like. Conversions, I'm a conversion guy first and a paint second, you know. So
I'm with you.
That's that's a hard call, to be honest. Honestly, probably one of my Mangler squigs. Just that model is probably my favorite model to build and also my favorite model to paint. It's just that every bit of it is just a joy. So yeah, is it my nicest model? Probably not, but it was probably my most fun to paint. So I'll give it to that.
We're looking for what brings us joy here.
Yeah,
Right.
That's in theory what we're all here for, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Amazing. Well, with that, folks, we're going to be signing out. Say goodbye to these folks just for a little bit because tomorrow we will be back. I'm going to be playing against Space Wolf Dan. It's going to be Orcs versus Space Wolf, 12 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Join us for that. And then Sunday, 4:30 p.m. Pacific Standard on Hobby Goblins, which you're now subscribed to. Definitely join us for that because it's going to be Bridget versus Space Wolf Dan in a Dreadnought battle.
It's going to get naughty.
It's going to be fun, fun, fun. So again, if you want to see more of this, like, subscribe. Check out Hobby Goblins, like, subscribe. And look, that's going to do it for us. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll catch y'all next time on the tabletop. Bye. Bye. Oh. Well, we're going to get another goodbye for you guys. We're going to do countdown for the goodbye. Bye!
Bye!